Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Hopefully, you can hear me. And if you can, I would love it if you would make yourself known and pop yes in the chat. I am Krishan Wright. I am the founder and creator of Blaxit Global and the host of the Blaxit Global podcast. I'm so excited and delighted that you're here. There is a lot to chat about. Hopefully, you caught my live recently with Star Sessions Varga, and we were talking about the crisis in Ukraine as it relates to Blacks that are trying to flee Ukraine. And I wanted to definitely start off this live because it will be relevant in today's conversation by reminding you of that live. If you were able to catch it, great. If not, the replay is there for you. But I also wanted to call your attention to the donation request that Star is making for our people to help support. We have Black people that are trying to get out and they're encountering racism. And she has this wonderful platform, Black Girl in Budapest. And she's been raising funds. And if you go on her feed, you can see women, getting their hair done, men getting, the new phones and, luggages. Because if you can imagine making such a trek, there are a lot of resources. And obviously the situation is still fluid and still ongoing. So before we dive into today's conversation, I just want to take the time to implore you in whatever resources that you have, whether it be financial resources, clothing. Apparently, when we did our live, we talked about shea butter and other essentials that you think as a Black person, if you were in another country trying to get home or somewhere safe haven, that you think they would need, definitely get in touch with Star. So I am going to pop the link to her PayPal donation, and I hope you will support. So, nevertheless, like I said, it'll be relevant to today's conversation. As you know, life is starting to open up. The world is opening up. We see Australia, New Zealand, different countries, Indonesia, different countries are starting to open up as a result of things easing with the Omicron variant. Of course, I know that there are people talking about a new variant that they are tracking in Europe. But as of right now, there are more countries that are opening up, changing restrictions, including masks. There are some airlines that are eliminating the mask requirement. And so people are like, wait, it's been 2 years. I want to do that scouting trip. I want to do my Blaxit. I want to just take a vacation. But a lot has changed. If you're like me and you traveled in the past 2 years, you will realize whether you're going domestic or going abroad, there are a lot of changes, not only on the US side, but that are very country specific. And so I thought before we go into people booking flights and, getting on out there in these, skies, that it was good to talk to an expert. So last year, I think it was, maybe it was a little longer than that, I had Arnitha Webb on. She's an expat and an insurance expert. And we did a deep dive into travel insurance and travel health insurance. But again, now we're in 2022 and a lot has changed since then. So I wanted to take today's opportunity to invite Arnitha to the Blaxit Global YouTube channel to tell us all that has changed, what we need to know, so that you can make an informed decision and be protected while you are moving about. So if you have any questions, please feel free, drop them in the chat. I know some people had sent comments and questions before then, so I've captured the ones that I was able to capture before we went live, but take an opportunity to drop a comment and let me know, hey, Lynette, how are you? To let us know that you're here, where you're joining from, maybe a country that you're thinking about going, and we can take it from there. So without further ado, I am going to welcome Arnitha. Hey,
Hi.
Arnitha. So, I am so glad you're here. I couldn't think of another person who is more knowledgeable about this subject. And I know, we had such a great reaction to our first conversation, so much so that I made it an episode in the Blaxit Global podcast. And
Thank
so
you.
I know for me, I'm getting ready to go to Portugal in a few weeks.
Mhm.
I did a scouting trip in October to
Mhm.
Costa Rica, and that was my first trip since 2020, right before the
Mhm.
pandemic. I went to Australia and New Zealand like 3 weeks before lockdown.
Mhm.
And traveling then and traveling now, mm.
Very different.
So I said, you know what? If I'm feeling this, I always like, okay, if it's happening to me, I'm sure it's happening to more people. And these are the things we need to know. So
Yeah.
before we dive in, I just wanted to acknowledge Alexandra the Great. Hey, you're watching from Houston. Hey, and I've got your questions
Hi,
right here.
Alex.
Ba ba ba. And yes. Oh, wait. So Lynette is heading to Lisbon in 9 days. Oh my gosh. I hope you're
What?
there.
Portugal is hot.
Oh my gosh, small world. This is awesome. So yeah, definitely pop your questions in the chat. If you have a friend that is planning on flying or blacksitting or scouting trips or whatever, tag them, tell them that this live is going on, share it later.
Yes.
But just wanted to welcome Arnitha back and dive into it. So for those that don't know you, Arnitha, let's start with giving a
Mhm.
little bit of background about who you are, and then we'll dive into the topic.
Okay. Well, I am Arnitha Webb. The best way to keep up with, I'm an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. So the best way to keep up with what I'm all about and what I'm doing is at my website at arnithawebb.com. But I am an avid traveler. I've lived in and outside of the U.S. back and forth. Um, I think of everything from a international global perspective. Everything. So, so but it's so funny that because we're going to talk about insurance today, and I'm actually going to dial it back just a little bit because I usually just talk about travel insurance as it really helps us when we're traveling internationally. But since we're talking about what has changed post COVID, I'm going to dial it back and really talk about how important it is even in our domestic travels. Because I think a lot of us, if you're like me, a lot of us, when I have been in the States pre COVID and I was traveling, I may have insured my trip. I may not have. Depends, might have just depended on which way the wind blew that day. But post COVID, we're talking about what's changed. Post COVID, I would highly recommend you insure every single trip, because the whole industry is so volatile right now. From the airlines to how they're handling luggage to how TSA is doing things, and that's just within our borders. But then you have customs, you have the country changes that's going on. Every time you go to the airport and board a plane, you should have yourself covered. You really don't know. We don't know. We don't know when we show up if our plane is even going to leave.
What? Wait, you know what? I'm so glad you said that because let me tell you, when I was leaving to go to Costa Rica, and I fly out of Newark. I live in New Jersey. Got on the plane. Everybody's on the plane except for we didn't have a pilot.
You see?
What? We didn't have
Hello.
a pilot. So like my first trip out the gate in like almost 2 years, and we didn't have
Who's
a
going to fly the plane?
exactly. It was like a domino because apparently, and again, this is October-ish. So this was the time when, the vaccine mandate, like, oh, if you don't get it, you can't keep a job. So pilots and other people were calling out, and no one thought, hey, he called out, we need somebody to take these people to
Yeah.
Costa Rica. But those are the unexpected things that can happen.
Yes.
And you also talked about luggage. Like once my flight got delayed, I also missed my connection. Got to Houston. Thankfully, my cousin lived there. and we were able to connect, and was able to give me a change of clothes. Reason being, they wouldn't give me my luggage.
You see?
So
It's
that's what I
crazy out
mean.
there right now. It's
Exactly. So I'm so glad
crazy.
you said that.
Yeah, it's really, really, really volatile. You can't assume for those of us who have been traveling and we kind of get set in our routines and how we do things, erase the board. Erase the board and approach your trips like you're brand new. Approach it like everything is brand new because you really don't know what you're going to run into when you get to the airport or when you even after you board the plane or when you land and all. You just don't know these days. Now, for those of us who are adventurous and that are not going to be denied, we don't care. We're going to be as prepared as possible for everything that can happen. And that's where insurance comes in because insurance is about mitigating risk. That's
Mm,
all it's about, mitigating risk. It's not about preventing anything. It's about being covered when that thing that you couldn't prevent happened anyway. So if your flight is delayed or canceled or you got sick or due to a death in the family you can't fly, a pregnancy you can't go or they cancel, whatever it is, you want to have yourself covered. Now, all carriers have their own way of doing things, and when you go to book and at the end of your when you're making your purchase and it says add your insurance on, right?
yes.
Or you're on Expedia or one of the websites and they're like add your insurance on. Okay, I've been doing insurance for a long time and I've done it all sorts of ways and I've been in your shoes and I've clicked on those buttons even when I had carriers sometimes just because it was easy. Approach your insurance in the manner where you can have the most control.
Mm,
Okay,
okay.
that's what you want control. So when you are clicking on, after if you're on Expedia or your booking site and you're clicking on, there's a third party in the middle there,
Mm, mhm,
right? There's a third party. Same way as if you have life insurance through your employer. You have life insurance as long as you're employed because there's a third party in there. You have that policy because that's a group policy through your employer. So, what I highly recommend is when you think of any insurance, you want to think, how am I in control?
mm,
So therefore, when you have to file a claim, you don't have to go through any third parties. You can go direct to your carrier. That is the fastest way to get your claim handled is when you can cut out the middle person.
mm.
Okay. I've been on trips where something has happened and I need to contact my insurance and I can't even get anybody. I can't
Wow.
even get anybody because the first number I'm calling is really Expedia or whoever I booked with, and they're like, "Oh no, the insurance is through this one," and then you call
Mhm,
that one, and I'm spending an hour just calling different numbers,
mhm,
trying to get to the source. So
mhm,
I'm talking from experience and as an insurance person. Cut out the middle person at all costs in all of your insurance decisions and go direct. So when you go direct, if you have a problem, if you're buying a policy through IMG, for example, then you have your app, you have your portal right on your phone. You're like, This is what I need."
mhm,
No middle person. That's how you get things handled. Um, and again, whether you're flying domestic or international, you really need to have insurance. Now, I know there's a lot of questions. I think, like minds think alike because um when I knew I was doing this, I started thinking, well, what are the questions I've gotten over the last 12 months? And so I put together some of those questions. I got them so I wouldn't even forget them. And I know you guys have questions. And I think the best way to really hone in so that this is truly beneficial to you is let's start attacking some of those questions. So, Christian, do you want to start with one of yours and then I'll get my list here?
yeah, that works for me. That
Okay.
works. So I will start. Alexandra have put a bunch of questions. So thank you again for the great questions. So the first one was, do you recommend the travel insurance that gives you full credit or the one that gives you a full cash refund?
Okay. First, that's carrier specific. Different carriers have different rules for how they do that. That's a real it depends. It depends. If you know for a fact that you're going to be traveling soon and you just want to keep that in the bank, sort of like keep that credit because you know you're going to use it within the next 6 months, then take the credit. Um, the good thing about the industry overall right now is that we're seeing more credits and even refunds in the travel industry and more attention being given to the consumer than we did pre-COVID. And that's
Mm.
because they had no choice, right?
Yeah, because they don't know, like they give you a credit, but right before your trip, you could come down with COVID and not be able to complete, your
Mhm.
travel plan.
Mhm.
So there's
Mhm.
a higher probability of the unexpected, let's say.
Mhm. So, sometimes and it depends on your own bank account. It depends. Do you want to put that money back in your account? What, a year and a half ago I was going to move to Germany and then I canceled. There was some things within that planning that I requested full credit for
Mm,
because I was like, there's no sense in them holding the money. I may not even deal with them if I decide to do this move later. And so I took it as, give me a full refund. And then there was other things that I said, oh, you can give me a credit. Like with the airline, I said, give me a credit because I know I'm gonna use it. Okay, I don't care about that. But with the insurance, you have to really just look at your own set of needs. You look at your set of needs, look at your bank account, because I can't say that the company itself, the carrier itself, is one is either better than the other because they have a different policy on doing a full refund versus a credit.
mm.
Okay. Um, that doesn't give me enough information to say one is a worse company than the other.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say I would add to that is, one thing to, I always answer from a place of what would I do?
Yeah.
Um, right now, not only has a lot changed in terms of, COVID and restrictions and things, but on a geopolitical level, as I started off our conversation with the fact that obviously there's a conflict between, Ukraine and Russia that is impacting us on a global level, and so, not only that, but inflation at its highest rate in 40 years. And so, if you think that these pressures might having a ripple effect on some plans, some future plans, it may be in your best interest to have something that gives you cash back,
Yeah.
because at least you can deploy that elsewhere.
Yeah.
Versus if you have a credit, I'm just thinking back to 2019 when I
Right.
went to Iceland and
Mhm.
we were flying back. And I remember it was a group trip and we were all on the plane, and it was Wow Airlines. And literally, we got back, and maybe 5 or 6 days later, Wow Airlines went out of business. And like people were stranded, in different parts of the world. So, hate to like bring out extremes, but I want to talk
Yeah.
about like things that can happen, that
Mhm.
obviously can be unforeseen, but
Mhm.
have real consequences.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
thank you for that.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
you talked, I think, about the pros and cons of both. Um,
Mhm.
and so the other question that she had is, what's the fine print? What's the policy not telling you? And that's
Mm.
interesting because I know, and I'm sure you'll get to it. There's a difference between travel insurance and travel health insurance. Um,
Yes.
there's
Yeah,
obviously, pros and cons to both,
there are.
but then also exclusions. Sometimes there are exclusions, and I think you kind of hinted at it before when you were talking about, third party sites,
Yeah.
and things like that. And, we're all conditioned to scan and click so that we can hit the submit button. But usually you'll see like a terms and conditions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a good time
Yeah.
to talk about
Yeah.
that.
That's a loaded question, first of all. What's in the fine print? Because these carriers, these policies, these are legal contracts. And
Mm,
anytime you get the lawyers and the underwriters involved, you have a lot of verbiage, right? You just have a lot of verbiage. And these carriers are not all created equal.
mm.
They're just not. Um And so what I do, if you notice, anybody who knows who's dealt with me, I don't deal with 100 carriers.
No. Actually, I was about to pop up the link because we have think
Mhm.
Arnita has been so kind to give us a link so that Blaxit
Mhm.
Global members can get a free quote. I used it
Yes.
actually the other day for
Yes.
my upcoming trip to
Yes.
Portugal, and it was easy peasy.
I don't deal
So
with a
go
lot of
in there.
carriers. Now, my primary one that I deal with is IMG because here's the thing, from an insurance professional perspective, like I'm a broker, so yes, I can contract with 100 carriers. But I won't have the space to understand all of those carriers. I'll just be putting stuff up there and I won't know what the heck you're buying, honestly, because I
Mm,
won't be able to keep up with it all,
yeah,
and that's just the truth of it. And for me, it's not important to me to carry 100 carriers. It's important for me to have a relationship with a carrier, to understand their policies, to understand what they're offering, to also be an additional person. I mean, yes, you go directly to them. They're the fastest ones that's going to give you answers. But I get calls where people, just want to ask some questions first, and I want to understand the policies.
yeah.
Now, there is another one that really I've been into for about a year and a half, and I'm starting to put on the site. They are doing some really good things. Safety Wing. So if you
Mm,
go
I've
to
been hearing about Safety Wing.
Yeah. So if you go to my site, is a couple of new things up. One is I have a link on the insurance page which will keep you abreast of the what's going on country by country as it's opening. So I
Mm,
have a button now that will keep you abreast of, if you're wherever you're booking a ticket, you can kind of go see, some information there. And I'm starting to put some links on Safety Wing because they are really specifically honing in on people who are working remote and wanting to live outside of the US.
mm,
And they are putting a real major focus on people who own virtual businesses. I own a 100% virtual business. Every person that's a part of my staff lives in a different part of the world. Okay. And there's a lot of us, who started out as solopreneurs and are adding on to our team. And we want to be able to offer some benefits.
mhm,
And there's a lot of us here in the US that part of our Blaxit plan is to take our remote position that's from a US based company, but live outside of the US. And so this is an insurance company that's really putting a special focus on people like us. And so I'm very interested in watching their policies closely. Um, right now, I love their premiums. I love everything they're offering. And Krishan brought up something. I'm going to share a screen because she's right. There is a distinct differences in travel insurance, in travel medical insurance, and in international health insurance. Those are three different products. And a lot of times people use the terms in an overlapping way. So bear with me. I'm
no,
going
go for it.
to um where did the button go? Okay.
Yeah, no worries. Take your
I'm gonna
time.
share some things because sometimes I'm really like bang, bang, bang fast.
No, no, go ahead. And then while you
And
do that, I can kind of voice over a little bit. So yeah, I think what you said was really important because and I love that you have this relationship with Safety Wing because like last night, literally, I was on a website and I was looking at, the entry requirements for Portugal on
mhm,
the Portuguese site, right? The from the
Mhm.
Portugal Portuguese embassy, and then on the U.S. site, and there was like conflicting information.
Mhm.
And then I was like looking at a Facebook group and I found a chat where with people who had transited from the US in the past couple days, because the thing that was getting tripped up was like, okay, I have my Vax card and, I'm a non-EU citizen. But then some read that you needed to test within 72 hours to enter, and it had to be like an antigen or a PCR test.
Mhm.
And then some said they, got to, um, the gate and they weren't asked for it. They were only asked for their vaccination status, and others had to provide the test results. So things like that can happen, as well as when I booked my trip for Costa Rica for my scouting trip. At the
Mhm.
time I booked it, you had to have a rider that had $2,000, that if you needed to be hospitalized for COVID, that was the rider.
Mhm.
Well, by the time I was ready to take the trip, that was no longer a requirement. But
Mhm.
it didn't make sense for me to change the policy and remove the rider, because it's like, well, you don't know,
Yeah.
like whether
Yeah.
with COVID or God forbid you're in an accident, and like
Yeah.
you said, you'll go into the differences between the two or three different forms of insurance. These
Yeah.
are some of the things that um, people have encountered, and I'll go into probably later some of the other um, issues that some of the previous guests that I've either come on the show or that we're always chatting offline have encountered as of late. So it's really about staying ready so you don't have to get ready.
It is. It is. And here's the thing, we're part of that too. The United States is part of that, people trying to figure out what to do as well. So it's not just when you go outside of the country, like, one week it's you need to have the rider and the next week you don't, or this is happening at customs today and it's not happening that way tomorrow. Like, this situation is very volatile and it's happening on the United States side as well. When I came back into the US, just like, there you go, just like week and a half ago or whatever, from France, when we landed in the United States, they said we would be on the plane for quite a while because the US was only receiving 10 passengers off of the plane at a time.
Wait, what?
Yes.
That's like me spending 4 hours in the line to enter Costa Rica after my flight landed at noon, and I didn't leave that airport till 4.
Yeah. We were
What?
told when we landed that the United States was only receiving 10 passengers at a time, and screening COVID. And that was just what, a week and a half ago. So after about, I would say that we sat there for about 40 minutes, and then someone decided this is going to take too long, or no, we're not going to do it that way. Let them disembark. And they let us, go off and get divvied up, accordingly. But and when I was in, God, I forget which country, where we were, somewhere recently. They switched the customs, whatever they were doing in customs, right in front of us. It was like, okay, it was like, vaccine and boosted over here,
Oh my
non-vaccinated over here. This is how they were dividing us up. So, and it's like long lines going, all which way. And then as you're in the line, they made a change. Someone, I don't know, if someone came up.
But that's how these things are happening.
That's how they're
Literally,
happening. That's how
it's
they're happening.
happening. Like I did a live in the fall with Marquita Harris, who that video is on our YouTube channel, and she is one of the participants in the Live for Free on Airbnb for a year.
Mhm.
And over the Christmas holiday, she was in Morocco, and then trying to, because every month, each of the participants from around the world, they get to go to a beautiful place, a beautiful destination, an Airbnb,
Mhm.
and stay for
Mhm.
up to a month, and then go to another one. Well,
Mhm.
because of COVID, and depending on your nationality, your passport,
That's
some of
right.
the participants are able to go to certain countries, so others
Yeah.
not. US is a little bit more accepted in most countries. Well,
Right.
again, Omicron happened. And even though the South African researchers alerted the world that there was a new variant, unfortunately, because racism exists in this world, they said,
Mhm.
oh, African countries, bow, you can't.
Yep, I remember that.
So she was trying to get to her next destination, which was France, to go to Paris. And guess what? Now you're in Morocco, boo.
You're in
They let
Morocco.
you
They're
go.
not gonna let you, yeah.
So
Oh
again,
my
I'm
god.
highlighting these stories because these are, real life incidences that are happening, and people having to make decisions on the fly, and things like that, again, you get ready. I mean, I know I pre-COVID, I was a flying fool.
Yeah.
And you get all that excitement and you're hyped up and you're
Yeah.
ready to go, especially if you're trying to get up out of here. And
Yeah.
then, like, bam, you get hit with like any and all things.
Any
And
and
so
everything.
it's
Yeah.
it's
It
important
took me
to really know.
13 hours to get out of LAX last month. 13 hours.
Woo,
13
woo.
hours.
Talk about
I
palpitation.
will not bore your audience with all the shenanigans that I went through at LAX a few weeks ago. I won't even bore you, but I'm telling you, it draws on every bit of patience you have.
Hmm.
And and I just, kept taking my breaks and woosah and
Right.
right,
You gotta really be into
gotta
mindfulness
be,
and all of that
you have
stuff.
to, when you want to go, you want to go. You
You
want to go.
really want to go. You really want to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, and
Um,
I didn't stop until I was on that seat and on Air France, and I was out of here. But
so I know I
anyway,
will
let me
say,
do can you see my screen? Can you see the
not
screen?
yet. I
No?
can't see it, but I don't know if those of you, and thank you for everyone that's popping questions in the chat. I am gonna we're gonna finish going through these, and then we'll definitely get to all those other questions. So feel free to keep populating that.
Can you
You want
see
to
it
try
now?
it again, Arnitha?
Can you see it now?
I can't see it.
Is anyone in the audience, can they see? It should say, it should be the first screen with Arnitha Webb and Blaxit Global.
Yeah, if you
That's
guys can see it, let us
Let
know.
us know.
Let us know. And if not, like I said, if you want to, there should be a button on either your side. When I normally share a screen, they said no, we cannot. KF
No.
said,
Oh,
hi KF, said no, they
okay.
cannot.
Let me, because I just did straight share screen because I didn't upload slides. So I'm
There
just,
might be a share window or share tab,
mm-hmm,
and then it
mm-hmm,
usually like highlights,
mm-hmm,
and then you'll be able to cast. If
mm-hmm.
not,
I
um,
did that.
at least
I
on my side, you can also share slides. Um,
let's try this. And I'm going to send this to you as well. So you'll have them and you'll be able to share them with everybody.
yes.
Okay. I'm
And
going to try
for
one
those
more time.
Yeah, no
Um,
worries. And then for those of you who are in Passport, our Blaxit Global private community, definitely, you'll get that first, of course. And then for those of you who are not in Passport, you can join Passport for free for 2 weeks. You can also, get all the goodness of our workshops. We just did a workshop Thursday with Adelia, Picky Girl Travels, and she did a wonderful financial workshop for our members. And so there's a lot of goodness going on in the Passport community. And Arnita, while you're pulling that up,
and
I'm gonna go back to the questions if that's okay.
yeah, I'm on the screen. I wanted to ask one more time. Can you
Yeah, of
see it?
course.
Can you see it?
Let's see. Is there anyone can say Lynette and Janique said June Quinn June Quet? Yes, I believe I pronounced that correctly.
Because I did it a little
Said that they
different this time.
cannot see
And
yet.
what is going on in
No
Denmark?
worries, no worries. But if
Okay,
you
so here's what I'm gonna do. Let me just I'll send this out and
okay,
Blaxit Global will have it. Let
yeah,
me just because we want to make sure you guys get the
yeah.
information while we're on.
Or
Let
if
me
you
just
have
let
the
me
link,
hide
you want to give it to me, I can try and project it on my side.
it's in my I didn't download it, so I'll give it to you afterwards
Okay, yeah,
because I didn't okay. So let me
yeah,
just highlight some differences, guys, really, so that you guys understand. As I mentioned before, travel insurance, travel medical insurance, and international health insurance are three different products. Your travel insurance is really the insurance that's for your emergency medical needs. So if you get hurt while you're traveling, um, your emergency medical will kick in for that. If your trip gets delayed, canceled, interruptions, your luggage, all of that ordinary things that we associate travel insurance with, that's what that's covering. Okay, in emergency needs. Now, move up a bit to travel medical. That's for people who are taking longer trips. Okay, taking longer trips, and they're buying temporary medical insurance that will work very similar to their domestic plan. Okay. It's going to cover unexpected illnesses. It's going to cover your accidents, but it's also going to throw in some additional things like evacuation. You know,
Hmm.
you suppose you find yourself somewhere and some stuff starts jumping off. you know, it's also going to have access to funds. Some policies will give you access to maybe an extra $500 as emergency money. Like suppose you lose your cards, you lose your wallet and you don't have funds, so it'll have that in there. Is similar to your domestic plan, but it's mainly for people who are going somewhere and they're staying longer or they're traveling around. Like I've gotten calls from people who, are going to spend some time in Costa Rica, then they're going to move on to another country and maybe to another country, the digital nomads or the people that are moving around. This is insurance that you can actually have it move country to country with you. So you can.
Wow.
Yes. Yes. You don't have to you can like just log on and say, "Hey, I'm in Costa Rica for the month of April."
Mhm.
Be covered while you're there. Okay, now I'm going to Colombia. Go right, log in. I'm in Colombia. It's going to protect you as you navigate the globe. Okay? Give or
So I
take a
have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt. I have a question with that. So if you are going, and I think this will probably get to a couple questions that have come in chat also. If you're doing one of those longer stay, right, slow travel, and you're going from country to country, and obviously you're talking about protection, things that happen. What if there's something, either an emergency, like emergency dental care, or something that's preventive, because we talk about medical tourism, that does that type of policy
yeah,
also cover that?
yes.
Oh,
Yes.
wonderful.
So your travel medical is going to cover that. Now, just to compare it to the one I mentioned a few minutes ago, the only time something like dental would kick in on regular travel insurance is if it related to the accident that happened. You know, like if
Ah.
I broke my teeth in the course of the accident and I'm in the emergency room, then it's covered. But if I have travel medical, my routine dental could be covered.
Oh.
Okay. I could be covered for,
My
because
ears perked up.
it wasn't an emergency. I didn't, fall and break my teeth, but my cap is loose or whatever. It's you see what I mean? It's a little different. One is truly emergency medical, and the other one is a little more comprehensive medical.
Got it.
Okay, and it's meant to protect you while you're living in a country. And you could, for most carriers who offer travel medical, you could have that policy for a year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Whereas your travel insurance is not meant for you to carry for a year. It's meant to be for a trip, a vacation or something. It's meant to cover you just for that stint. But travel medical, you can say, "Hey, I'm going to be here for 6 months. I'm going to be here for 8 months. Then I'm going to go to the next country for 6 months." It's meant where you can extend it. Now, key difference in international health insurance. International health insurance is really not meant for you to country hop with. Not in those, 3 6 month stints. It's meant for the person who, okay, I've signed a contract and I'm going to work here for 2 years.
Okay.
I'm going to stay put. This is where I live and work, and it's not my home country. So I want a fully comprehensive plan that's going to cover me while I'm living here. And it's you can only renew international health insurance is only renewable in like 1 year increments because it's not meant
Oh,
for a short stay.
got it.
Whereas the travel medical, you can do month to month because you can move around so much with it.
Hmm. Okay, and so
Okay.
I would imagine that with uh, that level of nuance and differences, that whether it's a trip, right, duration, shorter duration, to like a longer stay, to a year coverage, that the more comprehensive, the longer length of stay, the potential differences in premium.
Yeah, there's a lot of variances in premium because most of these plans come with different tiers.
Okay.
Everything I just mentioned has tiers within it. So you can get the base of any of these, or you can, you know, get the next tier. Usually they come with like 3 tiers within each. So I can get the highest tier in just a regular travel plan, the highest tier in travel medical, the highest tier in international. They have choices for you, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and then what also affects the premium is whatever riders that you might want to put on. So if you are a sports enthusiast and you do a lot of um, surfing and bungee jumping and whatever, you may want to put a special rider on it. So it's a lot of things that can start messing around with the premium.
Mm,
Now, the international health, of course, is going to be the most expensive of all three products. It's the one that's, 1 year and plus, and it's the most comprehensive. It's considered like the way we consider, I hate to even compare US because we're so different. We're so different because when you say a domestic plan, if you're talking about the US, a domestic plan is still a private plan. Does that make sense? Because we
yes,
don't
because that if I'm in another country and I have whatever Cigna, and I'm in another country, well, my
Won't
benefit
work.
exactly
Probably won't work.
yeah,
But what I'm saying is that we don't have a public health option.
correct.
So when we go to the doctor, it's based on what insurance we have. Our care is based on what card you're showing the doctor, right?
Sadly, yeah.
I mean, that's
I'm just
it's the
laughing because a
reality.
couple weeks ago I had emergency surgery, and I was like, and that's why season 4 is a little delayed, but it is coming April 4th. But like the first thing they was like, "Oh, what's your insurance?" And then they're like, "That'll be $1,100, please." And I'm like,
That
"Say what?"
it's
And I
that.
did that. Like I had to give them the card then to pay for it. And then now like the lab work and all the other stuff, like the other bills are coming in. But yeah, you're right. Like they want to
Yeah,
know
it's based on your
their
insurance
insurance.
and the recommendation of your care is based on your insurance.
Yeah.
A woman with the same issue with a Medicaid card may get one recommendation versus the woman with some premium private health insurance card. And
Hmm.
that's just the reality of our system. So that's what I mean when I say private. But when I say private and you're inside of Spain or the UK, they have a public option. So
Mm.
so when you have your international health insurance plan and let's say I'm living in the UK and I have IMG International Health. Well, that's considered a just regular domestic plan to them. It's a private plan, but their system is more equitable. So, what extra is that going to get us? If I chose an English speaking country, I should have chose one that's not English speaking. Well, if you're in a non English speaking country, you're going to be sure to have a hotline to speak to doctors that are speaking to you in your preferred language. You're going to you know if you want a private room, you could have the private room. Like all this extra stuff can come along with it. If I want to come back to the US, Let's say I need to come back home for a minute, or let's say I want the procedure that I need, I want it to be done in the US,
Mm-hmm.
which in some cases, I don't know why, it depends on what country you're in. But let's say I want to come back home for any reason. Well, that private international health insurance plan can cover you coming back home. Okay.
Okay.
It can also, depending on the plan that you have, can cover even if it has nothing to do with medical care and you just need to come back home. Now, most of the time in the US, it'll only cover you for 10 or 15 days,
Got
unfortunately.
it.
And
So
that's
if
because
you had
of
that
our,
plan and you had to come back, you only have a window in
you
which
know,
that coverage would
of,
extend, and then
mhm.
that's it. Got it.
And
Okay.
then you're gonna, and if so, if you stay in the US longer than that, you won't be covered,
Wow.
okay? Unless you pick up something, while you're here.
Mhm.
But let's say I'm a citizen of another country and I have the same policy and I need to go back to my home country. Well, that same policy may cover them for 1 or 2 months in their country. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, the U.S. is
It's different.
special.
It's Yeah, yeah. Insurance is so complex. Now you see why I don't deal with 50 carriers.
Exactly. And to help everyone that's watching and who will share this and watch it later in the replay and things like that, I hope you understand why it was so important. And I was so passionate about having Arnitha give us these updates because, there are, like I said, world's opening back up. A lot of us have been delaying trips. Or have, been on the journey, listened to the podcast, been a part of, Expat app or Exodus
Mhm.
Summit and Exodus Collective and all of these communities, and
Mhm.
now they're ready and rearing to go. But you need this information because
Mhm.
again, it's about keeping you safe as you're making these plans.
Yeah.
So I want to
Can I go
definitely
over can I go over
go
some
for it.
questions that I've
Yeah, I
I've
wanted to
gotten?
go for
Okay.
some of the. Oh, you want to do yours, or you want to do the ones that are in the chat?
We'll go back and forth. So you gave me some from the chat, and I jotted down some questions that I've gotten like in the last 6 months.
Sure, go for it.
So I don't want to cover all of them. Um, is health insurance compulsory for, oh, I can't see the whole thing. If health i- is health insurance compulsory for country entry or visa approval? That's one of the questions.
It's good.
The resounding answer to that is a yes right now, because all of the changes that individual countries are making, they are including a mandate for you to carry your own health insurance, similar to what you said earlier about having the $2,000 rider.
Yeah.
Um, so the short answer is yes. If you're applying for a long-term visa, they're going to want you to prove that you have your own health insurance. There are some countries as well that are now mandating that you show this even before they let you in. Now, the last time I checked, some of those countries were Belize, Costa Rica, Bermuda, Bahamas, British Virgin Islands, few more. That I'm just naming a few because again, this is volatile. This list just keeps growing. So, what I would say is, when you are buying your travel medical insurance, or your if you're just going and your ticket has a return and it's clearly a vacation, your regular travel insurance will suffice. If you're going for, I would say, over 30 days, be prepared for someone in customs to ask to see that you have some type of medical coverage. And that's where the travel medical comes in. And the reason why I'm saying be prepared, like Rashan said, we be prepared so we don't have to get prepared, right? Because they're just, these things are just happening day to day. They really are happening. And honestly, the travel medical insurance is not that badly priced at all. It's not that big of a deal. Um, Another question was, can you get, this was a life insurance question, but I've gotten this a lot. Can you get life insurance after being diagnosed with COVID? Okay.
Oh, that is a interesting one.
I've
Yeah.
gotten that a lot. So, yes, you can. You can still get a life insurance policy. However, it depends on the carrier. Every carrier is different. and they have different timeline stipulations. So one
Really?
company, yeah. So one company may say you can't have a diagnosis within the last year. Another company may say you can't have a diagnosis within the last 90 days. So it really depends on who you're going to. Now, another thing I want to point out is a lot of people have given me a lot of pushback on this where they go, "Oh, well, I went to get life insurance and it was the premiums was just absolutely ridiculous because they have some kind of residual symptom left over from them having had COVID." I've heard people have told me that before they had COVID, they weren't pre-diabetic, or before they had COVID, or since they've had COVID, they have like a cough that stays with
Hmm.
them. Like they have these residual things, and unfortunately, underwriters for every company has their own set of guidelines. They're looking at your pharmaceutical reports. They're looking at your health history. Insurance is always based on today. It's not based on yesterday. And
Ah.
this is why, yeah. So this is why when it comes to something like life insurance, it's always the earlier you get it, the better it's going to be because younger you are, the healthier you are.
Mhm.
So of course, if you can get a policy when you're young and healthy for $20, and if it's the right policy, you'll have it for the rest of your life. If it's not, it's going to expire at some point. I don't want to get into the differences in the policies. Um, I purposely keep things super super simple when it comes to life insurance these days. And so if it's something that you still need, there's a link on my site that has a real competitive carrier, and I look at how claims are paid, guys. This is why I don't carry 100 carriers. I look at how claims are paid. So if you need a quote, you can use the link, see if it works for you. It's a quote that'll, depending on your health circumstances, it'll recommend what you'll can get approved for and what's best for you if you still need that. But that is a question that I get a lot now,
Okay.
a lot. And I also get, can I renew my travel medical if I got a COVID diagnosis? Because I had a client who got diagnosed while they were traveling, while they were outside of the country. And then they got concerned because they were renewing their policy like every 3 months. And they were like, oh God, are they going to let me renew now? So the short answer to that, at least for the carrier that I deal with, yes.
Mm,
I don't know about every carrier, but for the carriers that I deal with, yes, you will still be able to renew. Okay?
mm. That's good to know.
Yes. Now we can delve into your questions.
Yeah, no, it's great that you touched on COVID too, because some people have uh, had COVID, had the symptoms on the spectrum. Some have tested positive but been asymptomatic. Some have had to quarantine. I know Stephanie had gone live on her YouTube channel maybe like a month and a half ago, where she was transiting to Mexico for a meet and greet, and the person that was on the plane was clearly next to her was clearly positive. And then subsequently, that was confirmed, and because she was in close proximity, she had to quarantine and missed all her events and things like that. And then, as you touched earlier on the fact that the long haulers have residual effects, I read blood clotting has also been something that's a feature for people who have been exposed to or tested positive for COVID. And so, again, there are all of these, obviously situation specific instances that can impact your ability to get insurance, your ability to renew insurance. And so, we can't go through all of the various scenarios, but I think the common thread is the importance is, getting this information, understanding what has changed, and then also, which I think we may get to later, is understanding, and maybe we'll touch on this first, is countries, right? So I know, let me get actually to that question. So Karen is planning a 1 month trip to South Korea for September. Any suggestions on travel insurance? I think this is a great question that, even though South Korea, to my knowledge, is not one of the countries, but are there, you know, well, I'll let you answer the question first and then I'll go over my follow up.
Mhm, mhm. I would highly recommend a travel medical insurance, and I would ask, is she traveling with any little kids?
Oh, okay. Yeah,
The
and Karen, if you're
the
you're
reason
still here, if you
if
wanna
she's there, if she can answer that.
yeah,
Mhm,
if you wanna pop that, in the chat, I can read that. The reason why I found that question to be interesting too is that, I talked about it earlier with the conflict in the Western Europe, or Eastern Europe, that, are there certain policies or are there certain parts of the world that are off limits?
yeah. Well, definitely, we it goes without saying that Russia and Ukraine and Belarus, that you cannot be insured. You can't be insured in any war country.
Mm,
You cannot. You
mhm,
cannot. There are some exclusions. There are some country exclusions. That's a good thing for me to put on my website, as a matter of fact. So I'm going to put that on my website. But the rule of thumb is anywhere there's a war conflict, there's not is a carrier is not going to cover you.
mm,
Also, if something is just like, before Putin actually did this thing, um, people were already being told, leave the country. US citizens were already being told, leave the country. Everyone was being told, go back to your home country,
mhm.
because they were afraid that this was going to break out. The insurance carriers gave notice.
Oh,
You will only be covered up to a certain point, and then after that, you will not be covered. So that's the benefit too of not having that third party in the middle, because like if you have your insurance carrier on your app and whatever, all these alerts, these country, all this is going to be coming to you as broadcasts. So
mm.
you'll know, if you're in jeopardy. Now the reason why, I don't know if she's still there, but the reason
Yes,
why
she
I
just
asked,
said that no kids, she's traveling alone.
oh, okay, then I would recommend IMG for sure, travel medical. And she can customize the plan, according to how, if she wants to have a deductible, not have a deductible, you
Hmm,
know up to how much she wants to be covered. Like, it's very customizable. And just so any of your people know, I do, when you look at my calendar, if you go to my calendar link, I think I actually isolate, if you want to have like an insurance conversation, I set aside like 30 minutes just to answer questions. um, if you want to do that before you make a final decision, I'm available. And I do answer the phone. I have some people call when I answer the phone. They go, "Oh, I wasn't expecting you to answer." I answer the phone if I'm available.
yes, yes. I love
So,
the fact that you are so accessible, and I'm going to try
mhm,
to pop
mhm,
up your site actually,
mhm.
so folks can, hopefully, you guys can see that.
Oh, you
But
did a better job than me.
I was
I
like, give me the link and I'll do my
look.
best.
I
But I'm
don't know
always
what's
in StreamYard because between recording episodes and then we have in our Blaxit Global Passport community, we have accountability calls and
Yeah. So
financial questions.
click on where it says travel insurance.
This one,
Mhm.
all right. Oh, how to become a digital
So
nomad.
So there's like a free download there. But I just added this thing on See the World by Borders Open. And then there's, if you scroll a little further down, there is some information about the differences in the insurance, and a button to get a quote, and
Wow,
and things like that.
that's
Um,
awesome.
and on that main page, you also so I do have a RYL Abroad planner that's available now. It's on sale for like 9.99. It's a digital planner to for those of us who um, want to it can help remind you of some things that you should be thinking of if you're leaving the country, or if you're going to be
Mhm.
out of the country. And the link for just regular life insurance for US citizens is on that page there too, at the bottom, where no examiners have to come out to the house or anything. You can
Oh,
just get a,
wow.
a quick quote right there. Um,
One stop shop. I love it.
I get more questions now about life insurance than when I used to do life insurance full time. I get all the
Oh my
questions
gosh,
now.
I bet. And this time has been a wake up call for so many people because whether you have uh, contracted COVID, you may have a family member or a friend who has been impacted by COVID, and so obviously, I think at least in our lifetime, right? It's the closest that collectively we've been confronted with our own potential mortality.
Right.
And so I think now a lot of people who thought of it as oh, I'll get to it or an impossibility, realized, that they didn't have a will in place, that they didn't have an estate plan, that they needed insurance or had insurance but needed more coverage because, a loss of work, or as KF put it in the comments, thank you so much, the long haulers who are unable to return to work, but then how do you pay your rent and, car and student loans and all these other things? And so I think the important thing to highlight is you really have an opportunity to look at the your life in totality and think
Yeah.
about all of the things, who's dependent on you, you were dependent of someone else, and if something were to happen to you, and that doesn't mean death, but if something were to
Right.
happen to you, what are the things that people need to know? Like, for example, it was just last wait, we're in March, yes, just last month, like out of the blue, I went from being fine to the emergency room and not knowing what the heck was wrong with me, and they didn't know what was wrong with me. And then 2.5 days into a hospital stay, they're like, oh, emergency surgery, and we got to go in. And I'm, my kids were distraught, my family, and I'm thinking of, okay, I brought a pen and paper because I'm like, okay, I really
Yeah.
thought it was going to be the death march for me, but
Oh,
I was
no.
like ready to write
Yeah.
out stuff because I'm just like, okay, if I don't know what's wrong with me, and words are
Mhm.
being thrown around, right? There's a mass, blah blah blah, and thankfully I'm fine, I'm healthy.
Yeah, thank
Things are
God. Yeah.
removed, minus an organ,
Yeah.
but I'm okay.
Mhm.
But then it was also the recovery because my mind
Right.
immediately went to, okay, emergency surgery means you have to make snap decisions. And I'm like, okay, I also have this trip. Am I going to be recovered in time for that? But I think it also gets back to something earlier you mentioned about the policies that if what happened to me when I was in another country, let's say Costa Rica, where I don't speak the language, um, being able to have a
Right.
doctor
What would you
that
do?
is able to
That's right.
inform you, because we all have the right to informed consent, right? You
Right.
need to have informed consent in a language that you're able to understand what you're
Exactly.
consenting to. And so
Exactly.
again, I'm highlighting these, vignettes just to kind of illustrate
Yeah.
why you really need to think through and not think through as humans always do, right? We always
Mhm.
default to the
Mhm.
best case scenario. I get on
Mhm.
my plane, I arrive, I live my
Mhm.
best life, it's
Mhm.
like wonderful. But
Mhm.
stuff has changed.
You
And
have to really, yeah, you gotta think of the worst case scenarios. Like, I think in terms if there's an emergency that, like, does my plan, especially if I'm staying somewhere for a period of time, does my plan have like what is that country health system? And I think in our first conversation when we were talking about the things that we take into consideration with a Blaxit plan, like
mhm,
for me healthcare is very important, so I look at that country's healthcare system. But like I want to know, like, is there a network of hospitals that my my medical coverage includes? Like, how am I going to be cared for in the unfortunate event if something happens to me outside of the country, and speak and having doctors that can explain things to me in English, having a hotline that I can call and what have you.
mhm,
We do have to think about that, and also don't just think of insurance, um, especially life insurance of your death, of it kicking in with your death, because there's a lot of things that it can do for you, for dismemberment.
Mm,
or if you become disabled, like, if your insurance plan, if your life insurance plan has a rider to kick in if you become disabled. So it's a lot of ways. To me, financial planning does not just include earning,
mm,
it includes keeping.
mhm.
That's how I
Yes,
look at it.
yes,
So
yes.
when people don't want to talk insurance, I go, "Then you don't like your money." I like my money to stay in my account.
I do. I love, when I was younger, I had a affinity for, and not that I don't,
Mhm,
right? It's
mhm,
not that I am not, I'm anti-male, I'm not.
mhm,
But, it's like, oh, boo, a bay. Nah,
mhm.
today my bay is my money.
Your money's your bank account.
And
That's right.
portfolio management,
Yes,
capital preservation.
yes.
You owe me, like yesterday. I was in ShopRite because I had to order food when I was incapacitated, and they
Mhm,
they didn't deliver it right, and they didn't
mhm,
refund me my money. And I was up
mhm.
in there yesterday. I'm like, guess what? Your girl can drive again. Run me
Hello,
my money,
where's my
right?
money?
And so it's
Exactly.
so important because, like, you talked about it, like the things that can happen. And I actually want to go back to a question I think also is relevant because you talked about different medical scenarios. Because with someone who's pregnant, like Alexandra, and I know she had to drop off, but how easy or hard is it to use travel insurance when you need it? Example: a woman buys a full cash refund policy in 2022 for a family trip in 2023. By 2023, she's pregnant and can't travel per doctor's orders. How long would she expect to wait for her full refund? But even in addition
That's
to that, like, these are examples, right? When you book a
yes,
trip, you're in one condition,
right.
then, the actual trip occurs, things
Yeah,
have changed.
anything can happen. That is so carrier specific.
Mm,
Um, because you have some carriers that respond within 30 days and you're good within 30 days. You have your money within 30 days. And then you have other carriers that are just sluggish
yes.
and slow. If it is doctor's orders, it should be the fastest return of your money there is. So I would say you shouldn't wait any longer than 30 days because anything that is doctor's orders is not questioned.
Mm.
Okay. All you have to do is have your documents that you can provide, file your claim. I would say within 30 days you should have your refund.
Oh wow, that's great to know because I
Mhm,
put in my request
mhm,
for claim for my trip to Costa Rica. As I mentioned, we didn't have a pilot, so I missed
mhm,
my connection. Had to stay in
mhm,
Houston. Got
mhm,
there 4 hours in immigration line, missed my connection, couldn't
mm,
get a shuttle, had to hire a private car. Then
mhm,
all of these things added up
mhm.
to a couple $100 that
Right,
I didn't budget for.
right.
But immediately as those things happen, I call the insurance, or even the fact that they didn't give me my luggage. And
Mhm,
this was, and I still have to deal with it now. This is what, almost 6 months out, and
mhm,
still no money, right? But the thing that I want to highlight was I immediately called them, even from the first instance. Like, okay, the pilot wasn't there. Now I'm in this hotel. My flight's like delayed. What do I need to do? But they mentioned something, and it was like, oh, well, we need proof that the airline didn't want to give you your bag. And it's like, and I was just like, wait, what?
They didn't have your bag. Not that
And
they didn't wanna give it to me. What is that?
yeah, and I was like, but like I don't have the bag. Like,
Right.
what are they gonna do? Like write a letter and all this stuff? They're like, oh yeah, because we're not gonna reimburse. Even though my policy was just like, oh, if your flight's delayed, if your luggage is delayed, and obviously the ticket showed that the flight was delayed. It was a delayed thing. They wanted all of this extra stuff. And again, who you choose for your policy, your carrier matters.
It
And
really
the type of
does.
information that they are going to request. You
Yeah,
want to know these things.
yeah. And see, that's if I find out that people are buying ING, for example, from my site, and then they're telling me, "Arnitha, this is what happened when I made my claim," then I'm gonna get on with my rep there, and I'm gonna go, "Wait a minute, my people are not being taken care of." know,
Mhm.
when they're filing claims, what's going on. But that's part of why I don't deal with 100 carriers though,
Yeah, and
because
that's
it
also
would
why
drive
when
me
I
crazy.
did this one, I went through your link and I was like, "Wait a second, we ain't going through this
Yeah.
other one."
You want
It was a
to
credit from another trip
yeah.
that I didn't go on. Like
Mhm.
they extended the coverage, and I was just like, "Oh, okay, I'll just apply it to here because I'd already paid for it."
Mhm.
And it's a one and done. So, but I'm still trying to get my money back from them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I don't own these carriers and they got their underwriters and whatever. I can't, put my life on anything, but I just want to be as close to believing I'm making the right recommendation as possible. Like what's whoever's on my side is who I use.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
that's what I can say.
Exactly.
I'm
Exactly.
if I'm getting on a plane, then I'm using what I'm recommending to you. So it's not
And
like
that
I'm
makes
using
all the
anyone
difference.
different.
It makes all the difference. And I just want to make sure I capture. So we got to Karen's question. She also said it's a shame that the idea of healthcare is such a foreign concept. I couldn't agree with you more. And then KF asks, are you obligated to inform your insurance company if you test positive for COVID but are asymptomatic? That's a great question.
Which insurance company? Your travel company or who are you what insurance company? Because
KF,
that
if you're
depends.
still there, if you want to just add on to that.
Yeah,
Um,
because I would and yeah.
I'm not sure if KF is still there or maybe writing in chat. But yeah, if you wanted to
If I'm
pop,
not making a claim, I'm not reporting anything. How about that? If I'm not
okay,
asking you if I'm not asking the company for anything, I'm not giving them any information on me.
okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. And then the other thing too,
Did I
and I
answer that
know,
safely? Yeah, I think I did.
yes, I think you did because I was talking at the top of our conversation when um you know
I
that
gotta remember I'm like licensed. Let me think of how I'm answering
look,
things.
you're licensed, but you're also a human being that navigates the planet. And so, if you need to do a little disclaimer, feel free.
No, I mean, you're not
The
there's nothing
opinions
you're not
expressed here are your own.
yeah.
um,
Let's move
and
on.
wait, let me just make sure if I didn't miss KF's. Oh, okay, make sure I didn't miss KF's response. And then I want to jump back up to we talked about KF also asked if travel medical insurance covers cosmetic dentistry.
Ooh. Ooh, I never had that question.
And that's okay
Excuse me.
if
I'm
there's a
actually thinking about I was actually looking through my mind's eye on because depending on what country you're in,
mhm,
they do have like procedures that are included that are not even included in ours. For example, some of our health insurance plans do not cover chiropractors, right? Or acupuncture. Well, you leave the country and you have a plan in another country and they look at that as part, regular care. So it
mm,
is covered. So I don't know a definitive answer. I would say it could depend on the country and what they consider what they have as ordinary care. I would have to
mm,
look at which country in the policy. And
okay.
it may even include which plan you choose because remember I said earlier in each of these plans you have options to build it out,
Hmm.
right? So it may even include which plan you have.
Ah,
So I would say it's a
so
combination. What
KF
country,
said the
which plan?
travel health insurance company.
No, I wouldn't.
Ah, okay.
Unless you're making a claim. Unless you're making a
Okay.
claim. Okay. And I wanted to touch on something about COVID because COVID is included in these plans now, but that's not a blanket statement. So when, let's say you're in another country, you get a diagnosis from a doctor that you are positive. That's the key. Not, oh, I have to quarantine because I was sitting next to somebody on a plane. So the
Mhm.
country is suggesting that are quarantined. That's not it. If you have a diagnosis of COVID and you're traveling outside of the country, and because you got a positive diagnosis, has nothing to do with you being asymptomatic or whatever, and that country says you have to stay in this hotel. This is our rules. You have to stay in this hotel and you have to quarantine for 10 days. That's when the policy is giving you is kicking in to cover that hotel, to cover your quarantine period. That's when someone asked about fine print, that's some of the fine print that they're putting on there.
Oh, wow. That's good to know because I know when let's see, this was last year and Tamika, Coach T, was transiting from Germany to Bali. She had to stay in quarantine for I think it was 10 days in Jakarta before she was able to continue on into Bali. And that was, government mandated quarantine for anybody who was coming in from another country. And you have to pay for that. You have to pay for your food and all that stuff because you're not allowed to leave, right? They're bringing you
Yeah.
food, etc. But it's good to know because, as you mentioned, and we keep highlighting, you know, what we're doing is having a conversation about what we know as of right now,
As
as
of right
of
now.
today.
Yeah.
What's going to
Yeah.
happen tomorrow, whether it be, with COVID or Ukraine and Russia or anything else, we don't have a crystal ball. And so
Right.
that's why it's so important to have these, ongoing conversations.
Ongoing conversations, exactly. And as I that's why I'm watching Safety Wing so closely too, because I'm
Mm,
looking to see how they are broadening their COVID coverage, how they are broadening, things to really suit our lifestyles these days because our lifestyles have changed.
yes, right? Working
Like,
from home, right? Like you said,
hello.
digital nomad was something that people thought of, and they thought of, young, millennials, like, a couple
Mhm.
of young millennials or whatever other generation outside.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then now,
Backpacking across Europe and all this nonsense.
yeah, and
Now
now
we doing it different these days.
right? I haven't been in an office in since 2000, yeah, 2020.
Mhm.
And and it's never gonna happen again, right? Like
Right.
I get recruiters that like,
Right.
hey, here's this, hybrid job or temporarily remote, and I'm like, eh, eh. It's like your girl is not putting on like the most I get dressed is what you see right now, right?
I
Those of you who
know.
ever, been guests on the Blaxit Global podcast, been in the group, your
Yeah.
girl don't be looking like this every day, right?
Our
And
life has
so it's just like
changed.
there's a level of comfort, but again, digital nomad now looks different, and we
Yes.
see other countries. And actually, I believe Stephanie Perry on her channel earlier today had a panel talking about which Caribbean country was better. But in
Mhm.
that conversation they talked about, because Zoe Smith, who was also on the Blaxit Global podcast,
Mhm.
talked about different digital nomad visas that are coming through in different countries, because now these countries that have, obviously, all of us collectively, every country has been impacted by COVID, not only from rates of infection to death to
Mhm.
economic consequences, that now they're seeing this pattern and cataclysmic change
Oh
in how
yeah.
people are working, as a way to now kind of fill in the gap for the loss of tourism dollars and things
Yes.
like that. So whereas you would
Yes.
go in on a tourism visa and you're like, hey, as long as I'm not making my money in this country, I'm fine.
Mhm.
They're like, hey, well, now we have this digital nomad visa that now costs
Mhm.
$2,500
Mhm.
versus, the lower cost visa of a tourist visa.
Yeah.
And so there's all of these, level of nuances, and I don't know to the extent that those impact the insurance. But
It
getting back
it
to,
is. It
oh, it
it
does.
is it does, and again, that's why I really have my eye on Safety Wing because they are really tapping into that market. They are really tapping
Hmm.
into that. So, and it's such a difference in like with these digital nomad visas, they're not all created equal. Um the grouping of islands that are introducing them, they look quite different than the ones that are being introduced in Europe.
Mm.
They're not, so you really have to look at where you want to go, what visa you want to go under, and don't do a blanket look at them. Like really look at each country specifically and see how it changes. And then some of these visas you can't apply as you're moving on. Like if you stay somewhere 6 months and move somewhere else for 6 months or whatever, you can't apply from certain countries.
Oh, wow.
So you want to be mindful of that as well.
That's
Like
good to know. I didn't
where
even realize that.
mhm,
Wow.
mhm. That's
And
something else I really have my eye on. Yeah.
and then keeping on that thread, if you're nomadic, is there international insurance that'll cover you in your home country short term?
No. And that's because United States is the most expensive for health insurance. And so
Surprise,
the only yeah. And
surprise.
so the quick answer to that is no, you can't really look for a combined insurance in that way. If you are a US citizen, the only thing you can hope for is if you have an international insurance plan. And again, that plan is minimum of 1 year in the other country that you're staying in, and it covering you for maybe 10 to 15 days of coming back to the US. It's not going to cover you to come back to the US for a month or more. So
Wow.
it's not gonna be at the type of policy where you can pick, oh, I want it to cover me in the US part of the year and another country part of the year. You can pick 2 other countries,
Mhm.
for your travel medical, but United States is the most expensive, guys.
Oh, so
US
that's
is
interesting.
and
So
US doesn't have a public option, so it's
that
different.
was going to be my question is like if you are, I'm thinking of my own situation, right? Say I'm in country X that's going to be my Blaxit country,
Mhm,
right? Let's say it's New Zealand, I don't know, Indonesia, and I come to the US for like a month or 3 months to see family. uh, does that then qualify then to get on the um, what is it? The oh gosh, why am I blanking on the legislation? Otherwise, AKA Obamacare.
yeah.
uh, does that qualify to then? Is that a qualifying event? I should say.
You would have to seek out a domestic plan that's here.
Hmm.
If you're staying for any length of time, because you're a US citizen. You're not a you're not a what see, I'm blacking out now.
No, I know
You
because I was like, my mind went blank. I was
There's
like,
a term.
what is it
There's a
called?
term when
Affordable
people
care.
are
That
coming
right?
into the US and yeah. I can't even think of the term of the people coming into the US that are non-US citizens. I can't even think of the term. But you are a US citizen. So, yes, you would have to come here, and if you're gonna be here for longer than that 10 or 15 days that your international plan is gonna cover you, you're gonna have to seek out Obamacare or whatever other plan to cover you the rest of the time.
So you're, let me just make sure I'm also following. So basically, your, even if you had residency in another country, your citizenship
It's still here.
over is over your residency. Like
Right.
your citizenship supersedes your residency, basically.
Yeah, you're still I can after a year or 2 years in a certain country, I can have residency in that country.
Mhm.
Has nothing to do with my US citizenship. I'm still a US citizen. It's just that I have the benefits of benefiting from everything that a citizen from that country has,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
And so if you're in a country with great healthcare,
That's on the top of my list because
I
I'm like,
know it's
look,
on mine. Yeah.
the body 10 years ago, 20 years ago is different than today, than the body will be 10 years from now to 20 years from now, right? And
Yep.
so I guess it goes back to something that I had said earlier is, as human beings, we're programmed to think of things in the best light, best case scenario.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is that every day we're on this planet, we're getting a little bit older than we were
Exactly.
right the day before. And
Exactly.
so it's not to be, doomsday scenario. It's just to be realistic. Like, hey,
Right.
if you're going to, your intent is to stay outside of the US or wherever your home country is for an
Mhm.
extended period of time, things may happen. You know, you may get
Yeah.
into an accident, you may get older, you may, we haven't even talked about in the event of death, right? And so
Well,
what happens
with
then?
the life insurance, anybody who's thinking about Blaxiting, I know I know the premiums on a term policy are a lot cheaper than a whole life. I understand that. Um, and I know for those of us who are in certain age brackets, it can be very pricey. I know if we have certain health issues, it can be very pricey. But the sooner you get a policy that is not going to expire, the better, especially if you plan
Mm,
on moving outside of the country, especially if in the event of death, you want your remains to be brought back or anything like that. Your life insurance policy that you own covers you no matter where you are in the world. But you
okay.
do not want a policy that is going to be expiring when you're in your 60s, when you're in your 70s. That is the worst thing that we do to ourselves. Trust me now, on the side of being in life insurance, it is the thing that I wish I could. It's the thing that our grandparents understood that somehow we forgot. They
Mhm.
had insurance. They paid their insurance before they had insurance.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the generations, we stopped believing we needed insurance, or we just based it on whatever the premium is and got sold these policies that are expiring on us and our parents when they're in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's the
Mhm.
worst time to look for insurance. Don't
Wow.
believe these commercials when they have these commercials where, 9.99, you're going to get life insurance. That 9.99 is a unit of insurance. That's per usually it's different in every state, but usually it's per 1,000 $1,000 blocks. So that
Oh,
9.99 that they're advertising is per every $1,000. So you figure if it takes an average of ten to $15,000 to bury someone, and you're paying, let's say, $100 for per $1,000 of insurance because you're over 65 or whatever, who can afford that?
yeah. You're
Who can
right. You're
afford it?
right.
You
It's
know?
the it's the things that, we don't want to think about, but that are inevitable. And like I mentioned, with COVID, and obviously it's not going away anytime soon. But it's the fact that, there can be, consequences. And the thing is like, if when, because none of us are here to stay, when you die, depending on your situation, if you have dependent children, minor children, you want to make sure you have enough money to cover their ongoing expenses.
Exactly.
There's a loss of income.
Yeah,
If you're older, and have adult children, then really, you may just want to have enough just to bury you, because, you don't want to have, or you're not trying to leave like an estate, because they are at that age where
they're
they're
okay.
more self-sufficient. So you want to look
Yeah,
at your unique situation,
yeah,
who you're dependent
yeah,
on, who might be dependent on you,
yeah.
and
And you
then
don't
think
you don't
about
wanna be a burden.
exactly,
You don't want that child that has 2 kids of their own to take care of, you don't want them to have to take $10,000 out to bury you because you didn't have life insurance. Um,
exactly.
you don't wanna be a burden. And sometimes I've had people say when the policy that they can afford is only 10, 20, or 30,000, they go, "Oh, but I wanna leave more." They wanna leave the $1,000,000 policy
Yeah.
to
But like
kids and the half
why?
$1,000,000 policy to the kids. I'm like, "Well, then you should have thought of that 25 years ago.
Yeah, because it's
If you
like,
could have
but why?
afforded
Because
it,
you're gonna be paying the
or
bill.
whatever." But I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like, when you think about it, when 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 someone close to you passes away, if their policy is a $20,000 policy, for
Mhm.
example, that's $20,000 that they don't have to worry about.
Yes.
So if the expenses of your services is 10, $15,000 and or if they have $1,000 left over, do you understand the peace of mind that is?
Yes.
That you
Yes.
have that they don't have to worry about, and especially if you're outside of the country, that they don't have to worry about if something
Mhm.
happened to you of getting you back home if that's the decision you guys have made as a family or
Mhm.
whatever. You're taking that burden off of them. And the sooner it's never going to get cheaper. Like it's never cheaper tomorrow than it is today because you're going to be a day older, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
the other thing too I want to underscore is I was having a conversation with a friend the other day whose family member's been diagnosed and has a an illness, is that it's important to keep your documents up to date, right? Because if you have this person as a beneficiary or somebody who's going to take care of your child or estate and they pass along, or or their situation is complicated, you want to think through those nuances, because of course our modern society and our modern environment doesn't mean that you're married to somebody. It can be your domestic partner. This one in particular is domestic partnership, also has a business, etc. And so there's these levels of complexity that you want to take into consideration, because now they have to examine their
That's right.
estate plan because of these
That's
things
right.
have changed and their policies need to be up to date. But
Yeah.
sometimes again, life is life, right? We get
Yeah.
busy on this hamster wheel, and these things that we know we should pay attention to start to fall into the resources of the I'll get to it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
of something unexpected
Yeah.
happens, but they have real life consequences.
Yeah, and having those important documents, especially for those of us who move around the world, having those beneficiaries designated, and having those documents handy in the event that something happens. Because if you're not able to speak, you something may have happened and you can't speak, you can't
Yeah.
communicate. You always want to. Someone asked me, "Oh, am I supposed to like travel around with a bag full of documents?" No, no, I PDF everything. I
Hmm.
p I PDF everything and put it in a zip file, like, God forbid if something happens, like, Chris knows, like, open that file.
Yeah.
Everything is in that file. You do have to think, especially for those of us who are planning our Blaxit and traveling around. You have to think about a lot of different scenarios to make sure that your loved ones are good.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's like when you have the benefit of time, you can be
Mhm.
thoughtful and intentional and look at your full spectrum, the full picture, and then make a decision versus being reactive and you're in the
Yes.
moment and there's emotions and endorphins and all
Yeah.
of this like whirlwind. And so it's hard to kind of grapple with, what the next right step is, because
Mhm.
now you're thrust in it, in the
Yeah.
deep end of the ocean. And
Yeah.
so that's why I wanted to, like I said, for those of you who are watching live, thank you so much for being
Mhm.
here. For people
Mhm.
that who are transiting this year, definitely share, because these are the types of things that we need to know. I just
Yeah.
want to go back to the comments. I see my brother is here. Hey, Damone.
Hi,
That's my
Timon.
hi. And then Junquette had, yes, it's dissuasive coming back for longer than 2 weeks to the US. Absolutely, because it's like
Yeah.
you
The
don't want to be
long
caught out in the US with no insurance.
yeah, the longest but that's the longest period of time I've seen is 10 to 15 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then
Our
KF asked,
we gotta vote, guys. Look, we can change it.
I mean,
We
look, the midterms are coming, and
okay.
I hate to burst anybody's bubble that thinks that things are going to stay the same, because they're not. So, but I digress. Speaking of aging, are there any companies that offer
Oh,
international long-term care insurance? Ooh, good question.
there are. I used to carry a really good one, and I've been looking at them thinking about going back to them. It's
Mm,
very expensive. Um, it's expensive, but I know a couple of carriers, and if if Krishan has your email, I'll put together some research for you, okay? Um,
And KF, just
and
drop
I'll
me a,
send it to you.
and then, or if you're in the passport group or want to join the passport group,
Mhm.
I put that link in here. I populated the comments with a bunch of links, and I'll also link in the description once the video processes and loads up. I'll link Arnitha's site, our past conversation, and some of the information that we shared
Yeah.
today. I also want to not lose sight of, because I want to say it while it's in my head, the
Mhm.
STEP program, that if you're traveling internationally, that you want to register with STEP.
Yes. You sure
And I'll
do.
drop that one in the comments too, because this way I'll remember when I repost the live, because the
And I
STEP
want to say
program is going to
yeah.
help.
I want to say something else. This is not insurance related, and we'll talk about this probably on another time. But a lot of the families that I work with, I don't know if you guys know, like I'm international. Insurance is like always in my head, but I'm an educator. I'm an educator, so I just launched a academy for special education, and what prompted this is because so many people that I work with are living, in all these different parts of the world, and they have kids that are in sped.
Mm.
So that's something else we can talk about at another time. I think Christiane and I, the one thing we share is providing the services that we need so
Mhm.
that we can go wherever we want to go.
Yes,
Right?
yes, yes. And to help the masses, I think something that,
Yeah.
I hear, and something that, I was having this conversation, I think it was in the group the other day, is one thing that when I embarked on this journey to create Blaxit Global and the podcast and all the things that have happened since then,
Hmm.
obviously all these things happened during COVID.
Yes.
And at that time, I'd been traveling, still in the embryonic stage of travel, by the way, but
Hmm.
I was in this world and starting on this journey, and I didn't know any expats.
Oh.
I had one colleague, Marcia, who was in season one, that we did a conversation about her journey from New
Hmm.
Jersey to Paris. But
Hmm.
outside of that, I didn't know any of my guests. And,
Hmm.
one thing that has warmed my heart is, how welcoming, and accepting people have been, and receptive. And, like I said, we all kind of like communicate pretty much on a daily basis, whether it's like me talking to Stephanie or Sheeta or Adelia, and it's been such a, it's been such a
Yes.
warm and welcoming community where we
Yes.
are all together with this common goal. And we recognize that, there's some overlap obviously with our audiences, but there's, there's this common ground where we all meet, and we all have a destination that we have in mind, and also to shed light on the things that are wonderful about it, and the things that are not so wonderful. And life
Yes.
is still life, so going somewhere else does
Right.
not mean that bad things can't happen to you or it's a utopia. It's going to be, times where you're feeling like you're missing your home country, or did you make the right
Oh, yeah.
decisions about repatriation, or getting sick, or dealing with an elderly parent. Like, there are all of these things that obviously, can't be encompassed into one conversation. But it all goes to say is that, what I love about, this collective Black expat community is that, it's a rising tide lifts all boats, that together
Yes.
we all want to see us win.
Yes. 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 Win well. Someone
Yes, we deserve it. We deserve
yeah,
it. It's like this is our,
well.
due. And
That's right.
I know Stephanie, I think, talked about it a little bit in her live today, was and that was why I created Blaxit Global, and I wanted to have it largely encompass, the world, and not just, Blacks leaving the United States.
Yes.
Is that,
Yes.
as members of this globe, right? We
Mhm.
inhabit this earth. There's no
Mhm.
place that we can't inhabit. And so while,
Right.
that we talk about, people that have made the trek, modern day people like, Tina Turner, to,
Yeah.
people like Josephine Baker
Yeah.
and James Baldwin. But you think back to even like my mom came up from the South, the Great Migration. And so we have been, migratory, we have been, trailblazers in our own right. And I had a
That's right.
wonderful conversation the other day with Michael Ruth, and that's going to be an episode that's coming up on season 4, starting next month. Um, and we talked about, the things that, these conversations today, and it was
Mhm.
so profound what he said. It was like these conversations that we're having today that's inspiring somebody who either had it on their radar, didn't think it was possible, or was planning, and now they have something else to hold on and be inspired by.
Mhm.
It's going to help the next person and the next person down the
Yeah.
road. And that's
Yeah.
where it was just like, wow, like, I
Yeah.
don't even think about it in that capacity. But that's why
Yeah.
it's just so important to be in this space and
It
continue
is.
to do.
It is. I think about my great grandmother, like how she migrated our family, and they were bold. They they went without the knowing and the foresight that we have. Like we have each other. We have Blaxit Global, and like you say, all this connection and community and everything. And our, great grandparents, that like you said, that migration, they did it without the internet. They
Yes,
did it with
right. They made a way out of
they
nowhere.
made a way out of no way
No way. They
and
was like,
did it.
oh, like think about it, the Green Book, right? Just
Hello.
so many things that, we have and it's not to minimize, our struggle today. It's definitely not the pain
Mhm.
Olympics.
Mhm.
It's to recognize that there's a commonality in, facing fear and doing it anyway,
Doing it
right?
yeah. Yeah.
Don't know, people say, oh, I'm afraid. And I'm not saying fear isn't a real feeling, but fear is just your head saying, what you're attempting to do, I have no frame of reference or recollection.
Yeah.
And so my
Yeah.
job is to keep you safe. And safe,
Yeah.
even though it's toxic, safe is what I know,
Yeah.
right? I don't
Yeah.
know what it's like in Colombia. I don't know what it's like
Yeah.
in Ghana or South Africa. And so that's where fear is. And when you're talking about, family members who might dissuade you, and maybe either, or friends that might be, haters or naysayers or whatever,
Mhm. Mhm.
maybe they're coming from a place of fear
Right.
or
And they're projecting that on you.
exactly. And so that's why it's important to have communities and safe spaces that you can be with like-minded people, that you
Yeah.
can, have these conversations and also share information that helps that other person. These are the
Yeah.
cheat codes that help
Yeah.
you get to the
Right.
next place that
Right.
much faster and better. Like I'm going to do a live, and I guess I'm going to announce it here,
Mhm.
is I'm going to Portugal in a few weeks, and I've got all these plans to connect with, and they've been so welcoming. Shout out, and I don't think they're here on the live in the
Uh-huh.
comments, but shout out to Black in Portugal.
Mhm.
They are phenomenal. But we're planning on doing some things together. And so it's just important to find community, get in where you fit
Yeah.
in, but
Yeah.
help that next person make
Yeah.
it to their safe harbor. And it just goes back to,
Yeah.
like I said, the top of the conversation with the Blacks that are trying to flee Ukraine and get to safe harbor. These are just, we're helping each other by having these conversations, but we also have to help other people that look like us who are also dealing with very,
That's right.
dire consequences and situations that if the shoe were on the other foot, you would want
We
somebody to
want
help
someone.
you.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And I would say too, don't let we have more distraction these days
Ooh, tell me.
that that puts instills all this fear in us. You know, I think sometimes we need to just turn a lot of things off and tap into these communities that are supporting what we want to do. Because yeah, it's so much distraction. It's so for everything you want to do, it's 10 things to tell you you can't.
Yes,
You
yes.
know?
these algorithms that we're not, and I know this is going like off topic, but it's definitely good to have these conversations because, a lot of controversy was when I decided to turn off the Facebook group.
Mhm.
And, and I'm also a digital marketer by profession. And so I have a love hate relationship with Facebook. And, for me, it was just like, well, I'm building this community, but I'm also contributing to the
Hello.
toxicity, right? And so it's just like, no, I would rather some place where I can have a safe space where people aren't, getting on their feed and they're seeing, negative, negative, negative things and that only reinforce the fact the feelings of, okay, I'm in this situation that I want to get out of or whatever. Or sometimes, I would get on and people would make, racial comments and things like that, not in the group, but I'm talking about,
Mhm. I
comments I
know.
put on my page. And so it was just like, you know what, I don't want to give that, right? That Facebook and all these other platforms, their algorithm is not built for us,
It's not
but
for
it's
thank
profitable
you.
off of us. So, TikTok and other creators that are putting their, time and effort into creating content, but their ideas and movements and all these other things are getting stolen. And I was like, you know what? We have to get to a point. I mean, 2020 should end, for some, but it should be a collective wake up call that we have to get past these, corporations and entities that they're doing, performative, allyship that just pacify the situation, but we continue to live out, all of the garbage day
Yep.
after day. We have to own our
Yep.
stuff. And so I
I
understand that
wanna just
people
frame that part of what you just said right there.
I
Woo.
was like, I know I'm going on a tangent and a rant, but
Keep going.
and that's why I was just like, you know what? We have to get to a point. And I know that for some, it was a turnoff and oh, the wrong thing. And I'm like, look, go create your own. Cause I come from a place of abundance. So you know what? Like I said, we collaborate all the time. Those of us that have our respective platforms. So I'm like, hey, get in where you fit in. If you want to go to Expat app, go. Shar is awesome.
Right.
We're gonna connect when I'm
Yeah.
in Lisbon. Do you want
Right.
to go to
Right.
Exodus? Go. Like it's I
Right.
don't own anyone, right?
Right.
So
Right.
if it's a place of abundance and you feel like you can create the place and space that works for you, do it. I did it.
Right.
That's why I created Blaxit Global.
Right.
But again, it's not to, poo-poo anybody who is using Facebook. I'm still on Facebook. I
Yes.
still have, I'm in groups because there's information I need. But
Mhm.
for what I wanted to do and how I wanted to serve my community,
Mhm.
I needed to put a stake in the ground. It's not going to thrill everybody. That's okay. But I know that for me, that every day when I'm posting, or if somebody comes in the community and messages and needs something, that I am on top of it and I don't have
Yeah.
to like sift through all of the other garbage to
Yep.
do and serve the way that I should.
Yep. I know what you mean. I get asked all the time, why don't I have a Facebook group? All the time. I'm I'm just getting ready to launch my group for Windsor Global. That's the
Mm.
SPED community. So I'm launching that, but I'm launching it on a private platform. I'm not launching it.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
So when I'm here with you, I
Yes,
am right
like
here with you.
people don't get it, and when you're blazing the trail, right? So everybody has to do what works best for them, right? But you've got to take your stuff back. You have
Oh
to
yeah.
own it from the
I'm
outset. You
I'm
have,
not
and then,
I'm not
I see
trying to
the
mess.
comments lit up because this conversation. So Karen says, "Thank you, Krishan, for creating Blaxit Global. This is the green book of the
It
internet." Thank
is.
you.
It really is. It really
Yes,
is.
yes, yes,
It
and
really is.
also, yes, Cat said all of this. Thank you. You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you.
And like I said, it's each one, reach one, teach one. And
That's
so
it.
I
That's it.
will, end it there because I know
Drop the mic.
where we were going to end. But I always love talking to you. So definitely want to thank you, Arnitha, for your time,
Absolutely.
your information, your energy. I know you're going to share
Absolutely.
those slides with
Yes,
me.
Imma download it and send it right over to you so you can I don't know what's been going on with me lately with shares. I don't know. I
It's
don't know.
okay. It's okay. You know what? It's the internet. The internet gremlins decided they were going to come out today, but you know what? They still ain't kill the vibe. We did what we needed to do.
That's
And,
right.
just another, like I said, shameless plug. One, for people to join Blaxit Global Passport. You can join for
Yes.
free for 2 weeks.
Yes.
And season 4 of the Blaxit Global podcast. You're like, Krishan, when's it coming out? When's it coming out? It is coming out
Oh
April
my
4th.
goodness.
So I
Yes.
will be launching that episode and the April episodes while I am in Portugal. But there will be
Mhm.
also new content and some lives because, like I said, the
Mhm.
Black expat community in Portugal is popping,
It
and so
is.
I'm looking
It
forward
is.
to
Because I'm
seeing
gonna
them.
be there later. I'm gonna be there later this year. So
Oh,
I
oh my god!
yeah.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, I'm so excited for this trip. It's woo. And I needed that because y'all all know like Costa Rica was no Costa Rica for me. So
Yeah.
I needed this level of excitement back in my life. But
Yeah.
so I want to thank everybody who carved out time out of their busy day to
Mhm.
join us live. And for those of you watching the replay, oh hey Dawn, how are you? So glad you could join us. And definitely make sure you watch
Awesome.
the replay, or if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, hit the
Mhm.
notification bell. Now that I'm
Mhm.
back and able, I was down for the count with my
Yeah.
surgery and recuperating, but you guys will see and hear more from me
Mhm.
as time moves on. So just
Mhm.
again want to thank you for being so willing to share your
Absolutely.
information, and it's always a pleasure. And for everybody
Absolutely.
else, have a wonderful Saturday.
Bye.
Bye.